In this video you will learn how to draw super realistic eyes and what mistakes to avoid when drawing them. Let's get stuck in. The eyes are my favourite part to do when I'm drawing and painting portraits. When you get it right, the artwork suddenly comes to life and it really makes the portrait buzz. But when something is just slightly wrong, the portrait won't look quite right and it'll be really frustrating to try and fix. Follow these tips and tricks to avoid that problem. We'll work our way through each part of the eye in turn. You might want to take some notes as there's a lot to take in. So let's get started.
So here's a list of don'ts to avoid doing when drawing eyelashes. 1. Parallel lines like soldiers on parade. On occasion, some lashes are parallel to each other, but on the whole, they grow in all sorts of directions. 2. Drawing too many lashes or too few, especially along the lower eyelid. So if you draw too many, sometimes it could look like fur, and if you draw too few, well, it just looks like too few. 3. Drawing lashes the same thickness and all exactly the same length. Eyelashes taper towards the end and are thickest where they emerge from the skin, and often appear at different lengths due to their different directions of growth and perspective. 4. Lashes that emerge from the wrong part of the eyelid. The eyelids are skin that partially cover the eyeball that have a thickness to them. This is quite apparent on the lower lid. Lashes grow out from the edge of the skin, not from anywhere else. So the do's we need to get right with the lashes: look at the directions they grow in, draw each lash individually, lashes always taper towards the tip, some are lighter in tone than others, and pay attention to where they start from. Now some don'ts to avoid doing when drawing the irises. 1. Hard edges. The outer edge of the iris is drawn with a hard edge. If you soften the hard edge, I found this often helps add to the realism. 2. The whole iris is visible. Most of the time, the iris is partially covered by the upper eyelid or both. It's only really visible in its entirety when expressing shock or surprise, and that's not always. 3. Spoked iris. The overlapping fibres and cells are often depicted like bicycle spokes, when in fact the fibres are a lot wider than just radial lines. 4. The iris is too big or too small. It's immediately noticeable when the iris is too big or too small. Of the visible eyeball, it should roughly occupy about a third of the space. So some points to observe when drawing irises. Keep the outer edges of the iris soft. Usually both the top and bottom lid touch the iris. When drawing the radial fibres, try to avoid drawing the bicycle spokes we commonly see. Observe and draw the light and dark shapes you see in the image. The iris should take up about a third of the visible eye. Okay, so just a couple of don'ts for drawing the pupils. 1. The pupils aren't drawn central. Okay, the pupils not being drawn central to the iris actually happens with a lot of people, so in this case it's more of an aesthetic correction than anything else. And secondly, the pupils aren't drawn or painted dark enough. Now you often hear teachers saying, never use black, and often it's for good reasons too, as you'll discover when we move on to painting and colour. But when painting portraits, this is the time to use pure black, straight out of the tube. The pupils are a hole in the middle of the eye in which no light reflects back out again, except with camera flashes and things like that. But yeah, paint it black. So a couple of things to remember when drawing the pupils. Make sure you draw the pupils central to the iris, a little bit like the bullseye of a target. And secondly, make sure you draw the pupils black, the darkest tone in the entire portrait. Next up is the white of the eyes, or the sclera. 1. Drawn too white. If you're going for realism, the sclera should seldom appear as pure white, especially if there are highlights reflected in them. Highlights won't be visible against a white background, so in order to make the highlights visible, I often darken the surrounding sclera to increase the contrast between the white highlights and the whites of the eyes. And 2. Not treat it like a sphere. Remember that an eyeball is a sort of sphere, and light and shadow interact with it in exactly the same way as if it was a wet cue ball. Then shadows from the eyelids will add to the sphere shadows. The SCLERA. So remember to keep the pure whites for your highlights, and if so, darken the SCLERA so that you can see the highlights a little clearer, and treat the eyeball as a sphere. So dark shadow opposite the light source, and give it some shadow below the upper eyelid. The eyelids. 1. The fold is the wrong shape, with no visible taper. More often than not, you'll see the fold line of the upper eyelid drawn as a symmetrical arc above the eye, when actually it has more of a subtle arc, sometimes resembling the top of a trapezium, or the apex of the arc favouring one side or the other. Also, the ends of the fold are less deep and shouldn't really end abruptly, but rather taper and lighten in tonal value, as more light can enter the fold there. 2. Not enough thickness. Most of these examples show a similar thickness to the lower lid skin, when in fact, when seen from the front, varying thicknesses are visible all the way across the width of the eye. And even though it'll be in shadow, this can sometimes be seen on the upper eyelid. So some things to look out for when drawing eyelids. Look carefully at the subtle curves, the arc of the eyelid fold, and also pay attention to the thickness of the lower lid, especially at different points along the eye. Now we get on to the eyebrows. 1. The slug. Getting realistic eyebrows are a common problem. Over-darkening the eyebrows with hard lines can make the eyebrows resemble slugs instead of short hairs. Shapes of eyebrows can vary a great deal depending on the person. All I can really say here is watch for variations in tone and density of the hairs, and try to match the outline as best you can with as little contrast as you can. Break up hard edges of the outline with individual hairs. 2. Direction of hairs. Again, all I can say here is pay attention to the direction of the hairs and how they grow. Around the outer edges, keep the contrast between hair and surrounding skin down to a subtle minimum. So some basic slug prevention. Try and soften the edges with individual hairs, and notice the varying density of the hairs as they go around the brow. Pay attention to the directions of the hairs as they curve around the brow. Now a few general notes. Make sure the eyes are aligned with each other, a straight line from the front, and along a curve around the head from other angles. From the front, the eyes should be about one eye width apart from each other, roughly. The eyes are not symmetrical almond shapes with pointy ends, so pay attention to the subtle curves of the eye. Try to draw most of your drawings without visible outlines to shapes. Outlines do not really exist in real life. They're the result of a difference of tone, texture, or colour, or a variant of all of these. Try to draw what you see, not what you know, or you'll end up drawing symbols for things instead. So pay close attention to hard and soft edges, to gradients of tone and colour, and really try to recreate what you actually see in front of you, albeit from real life or from a photograph. When you get it right, the results will be most rewarding. And as I said at the beginning, the eyes are the best part of a portrait. They can make or break the illusion of realism. And now for a little bonus fun fact for you, as promised. If you or someone you know has blue eyes, they're not actually blue. Huh? Yes they are. No. Actually, they don't contain any blue pigment in them at all. They're blue for the same reason the sky is blue and the sea appears blue. Our eyes are made up from 2 layers of overlapping fibres and cells. The back layer for everyone is brown, while the front layer, called the stroma, contains some melanin for brown-eyed people and none for blue-eyed people, and just a little bit for everyone in between. Blue eyes appear blue due to their structure. They absorb long red light rays and reflect the shorter blue ones. This is why people that don't have brown eyes can appear to have different eye colours in different light. We often think of our eyes as separate things from our brain, when in fact they're often referred to as extensions of the brain, a continuation of the central nervous system. Blind people who have zero perception of light or vision still need their eyes to control their circadian rhythm, which uses their retinal ganglion cells. The circadian rhythm is the internal body clock that tells us when it's time to wake up and time for bed. People who've had their eyes completely removed for certain reasons live in a state of perpetual jet lag, as their circadian rhythm has no means of gauging night and day. How horrible would that be? So I hope you learned something today, and if you like this video, you'll really help me out by watching some more, liking, subscribing, and sharing with others. And I'll see you next time. Bye.